I know you've all studied World War II, but this is to give you a feeling of what it was like growing up as a kid in North Weymouth and going into the Army in World War II. I moved to Weymouth when I was 3 years old, down on Princeton Avenue, down by Benson's. And I went to Bicknell School, which is now a condominium, Bicknell School, and we had 8 grades then, from 1st to the 8th. And the first few years when I was at Bicknell School, we had Memorial Day exercises. And believe it or not, on the stage were Civil War veterans. Now, I'm a pretty old guy then, but Civil War veterans were sitting up on the stage, probably about 10 of them at that time. By the time I was in the 5th or 6th grades, they were pretty well died off. And then I went to St. Jerome Church. We didn't have a parochial school. And I was an altar boy, just like Dan here. And, or only altar boys at that time, no altar servers, altar girls. And I had the paper route in front of the church. On the wall, down as you go out of the parking lot, I had paper stacked high. I had sold 200 papers on a Sunday morning. It was a beautiful paper route, choice paper route. And then after Bicknell, I went to Weymouth High School and took the college course. And I was in Weymouth High School from 1938 to 1942. And like all of you, I was a ball player. I was first baseman for Weymouth High for 3 years. I was a starter for the last 2 years. And in fact, at the end of my junior year, I had a tryout with the Boston Braves, which is now the Atlanta Braves. But then a year later, the war was broke out, so that was the end of the ball career. And then these were happy days for us. We were just growing up like you kids. There were not many problems. The most important thing in my life at that point was playing baseball. When I was about to go into my second year in high school, I had to go to the hospital and have my tonsils out. And at that time, they gave us what they call ether. So you're half out of it. And when you wake up, when I woke up, there was an old man next to me with a big handlebar mustache, and I looked over, and he had a newspaper, the Boston American, and there was a big headline, "War Begins." Now that was September 1st, 1939. This was the war when the Germans marched into Poland, and that's the New York Times headline at that time. Well, but that didn't mean, so the war began over there, and we really didn't have too much concern. We were sort of an isolationist country at the time, and so we didn't think too much about it. But then, early 1940, I was a sophomore. We had a friend of the family who was Johnny Griffin. He was a pilot, and he was taxiing B-17 bombers from the United States to England. We weren't in the war, but we were supplying England with bombers. And he was a great pilot, and he just taxied them over. And I remember being in my living room up here on Princeton Avenue, and he was sitting there, and he said, "The war is we're going to be in it." And he pointed at me, "And you're going to be in it." So, again, didn't worry too much. Baseball was still the important thing in my life. A little bit of homework, like my Latin students here. And then 2 years later, less than 2 years later, Pearl Harbor. I was a senior in high school, and I was an usher over at the Lincoln Theater. There was a theater across the bridge, and some kids ran in and yelled, "The Japs have bombed Pearl Harbor." Again, I don't think I was great in geography. And where's Pearl Harbor? And the Japs. I said, "They only make those little paper umbrellas. We'll beat them in 6 weeks." And anyway, that was the start of our thinking. The next day, after Pearl Harbor, I was a senior in high school, and over the loudspeaker, we heard this announcement.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
So we were at war. We graduated in June of 1942, and all the gang, the guys you all hang around with, decided, well, what are we going to join? Are we going to join the Army, Navy? We all knew we were going to go. And we hung around Bicknell Square and Thomas's Corner, and so they stopped enlistments. You couldn't enlist because everyone wanted to go into some branch that they had too many. So they stopped enlistments. And of course, the draft had been in for a couple of years. So 5 of us, and they're in that picture, they all made it back home. 5 of us went up to town hall and said, we want to volunteer to be drafted. And I said, I'd like to go in the Air Corps. And there's a lady there at the town hall counter, and I said, well, if you volunteer, you probably can get in the Air Corps. So we volunteered, and we were soon thereafter. I think we took our physicals about the end of about December, and I went into North Station where they had everyone was going in for their physicals, and I fortunately passed my physical, and I had my choice of the Army, Navy, Marines, or Coast Guard. But I said, I want to be in the Army Air Corps was Army Air Corps then. It was Navy Air, Army Air. There wasn't any Air Force as such. And so I said, well, I think that I'll go in the Army because I'm going to go in the Air Corps. And so we go up to Fort Devens and more physicals and aptitude tests and so forth. And we started on a long train ride. Didn't know where we were going. And a lot of my classmates were in the train. We all were going at the same time. And a fellow across me, well, I worked for Pratt Whitney in making airplane engines, and someone else had done something. Well, that's good, we're going to some airfield. So 2 days in the train, and we get down, and I guess they said we're in Texas. You know, all the red dirt and all that was done. So it was early in the morning, and the door opened up, and I looked out, ready to get out of the train, and there was a man there with a gold leaf. He was a major. And I said, what airfield is this? He said, this is Camp Maxey, and you're in the field artillery. That was my first experience of volunteering. So I was in the field artillery for 6 months, and then I had a fairly good IQ, so they chose me to go to engineering school at Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. Certain people with certain IQs were chosen for that, and it was an 18-month program, and at the end we'd probably get a commissioner's lieutenant. Well, that was late 1943, early 44 that was in this program, and the Army broke up the program. They needed troops for the invasion of Normandy in the following June. So we all got thrown into the infantry. So it gets from Air Force, Hope, to artillery, now into the infantry, 12th Armored Division Infantry. So we had to go through all our training again as infantrymen. The summer of 1944, in the infantry, down at Camp Barkley, was for about 20 days straight, it was 110 degrees. And I was sitting in a half-track. That was a track that they carried the troops around in a hot day. And all of a sudden, I said, I want to go overseas. I want to go overseas and win a lot of medals. I don't know, whether it was my guardian angel or what, gave me the strength to want to go overseas and go into combat and win medals. And so at any rate, that feeling fortunately carried me through, right through into combat. So I always say it was the Holy Spirit or the guardian angel that gave me that strength from not wanting to do this to being anxious to do it. We came into England for 6 weeks, hung around mostly, and then went over to France in November. Landed at Le Havre, and the Le Havre people weren't too happy about us, even though they had been liberated by the troops coming in Normandy and all. They had been bombed considerably, so we're in the back of a big truck, packed in there like sardines, and they were pelting little stones at us. So, welcome to France. So then it was raining horribly. We were in the back of a truck, and we had what they called in shelter halves. Your buddy and you each had a half a tent, and you button it together and stick, some sticks and stick them into the ground, and that's where we slept. Now there was about 4 or 5 inches of water, and we had bedrolls. I don't know if you know bedrolls. So we went into our bedroll, and my friend Eldon Steiger and I just laughed and laughed and fell asleep in the water. Well, anyway, we then proceeded up to closer to the line, and we were this is in November, late November, early December. We were in small skirmishes, not heavy combat, but enough to know that you were scared. When things start landing around, you get a little bit scared. But it wasn't really bad. Now, Christmas of 1944, we were surrounded by German troops and almost got captured, but we got out of it okay. Now, in that time, we were in the infantry, and we would ride, 4 or 5 of us would ride on the back here, or the back of the tank, and go into a town, and then just before we get into town, we'd jump out and spread out with our rifles and to take the town. Our soldiers had prevailed at the Bulge, and now Hitler had started what they called Operation Nordwind, and coming in, and he wanted to take Strasbourg, which was south of the Bulge. And there was a bit of a political decision there that de Gaulle, who was the head of the French forces, said if they take Strasbourg, it'll be terribly demoralizing. So our job was to keep them from getting Strasbourg. On January 7th, 1945, we were thrown into a battle against German troops, and it was our intelligence, Army intelligence, said there's a small Wehrmacht outfit that we're going to be going against, just like we had in the past, take them over and win the town. They were going to take the town of Hildesheim. And as it turned out, on January 7th, we went from a town called Bischweiler into Rohrbach, and we're jumping off our tanks and had to crawl because the shells were landing all over the place, had to crawl to La Brumelle, which was the town before Hildesheim. It was called Purple Heart Lane. We lost, my buddies, all my friends, we lost half of them, going from that spot, which was probably a quarter of a mile on our hands and knees, to the waterworks. They were either wounded or killed on that trip. And then we reached the waterworks. I was still good. I was, with my frozen feet and all, I was doing it. And we got into the waterworks, and we were there a day or day and a half. Now, I remember all this time, no sleep, no food. Didn't even think about that. We didn't. It was very, very cold. So there'd be a lot of shivering. You didn't know whether you were shivering because you were scared out of your wits or because you were cold. We were in the waterworks. This big brick waterworks, and there was like 3 brick buildings. And I was standing in and I think I remember telling you that when we had the slides in your French, when we gave the French, but 5 of us standing around in a circle in the waterworks, and a mortar shell came through the roof and landed right in the middle of us, and it was a dud. Because if it had gone off, we would all have been killed. Again, the old guardian angel was there, and that was quite an experience. But anyway, we then had to get out of the waterworks. We were taken prisoners. They were taken prisoners, German prisoners, and we weren't being taken. Now, I want to just tell you now what our mentality was at the time. We found out that we were fighting 2 SS divisions of 15,000 each, whatever, and a crack Wehrmacht outfit, grenadier outfit. That's what we were up against, not 800 regular soldiers of the Wehrmacht, but really SS troops. And so we were really in tough shape. So we knew, because of something that happened in the Bulge, and I'm going to have you see this. This had happened 2 or 3 weeks before, so we all knew about it. Slide, yeah. About this incident that happened in the Bulge. So obviously, our decision was we would never be taken prisoner. Even though we were about to be surrounded, we would not let ourselves be taken prisoner. So we knew that we would fight to death. We'd rather be killed in fighting in action than be taken to prison because of what happened in Malmedy. Now, we left the waterworks and crawled on our hands and knees to the town of Hildesheim, which was our objective. In the time I was in Hildesheim, in these big brick buildings, I had my closest friend and the fellow that I made my tent with and all, Eldon Steiger. We were up in the courtyard and the shells started coming in. I said, Eldon, just standing here, we're not doing anything. We can't do anything. Let's go down in the basement. They have down in France, they have these big cement basements. And I went down and I saw there were a lot of civilians there with their little babies and all crying, and the shells are landing above. And I wasn't down 5 minutes. Eldon said, no, I'm going to stay. In 5 minutes, Eldon was downstairs on a stretcher, and he had a wound in his neck. And I started saying, Eldon, I told you to come downstairs. But it wasn't life-threatening. And then they put all the wounded, we had so many wounded, on the back of tanks, back here, and to take them back to the hospital. So Eldon was one of the 4 in the back of the tank. And the SS troopers hit them, and Eldon was killed. And 2 others were killed, and another lost 2 limbs. This was us just in August of 1944. Together, he has a baseball glove, and this is me, and this is Eldon. And this is the Bucyrus, Ohio newspaper telling that Eldon dies in the war. And down at Hildesheim were SS troops running up and down the street, German tanks. We were all cut off from communications. We were surrounded, and we were in a lot of brick houses over there, and courtyards, brick courtyards. And a lot of our fellows got into bayonet fights, and they weren't as good as the Germans in bayonet fights, so you know what happened. And we were there probably about 2 days, completely surrounded, out of contact. And on the morning of the January, now remember, we started January 7th. This was January 11th. I don't think we slept or ate. We were reduced to 15 out of my company. There were 180 in a company. We were reduced to about 15. A sergeant said, "I think we can get out. I think we can get out." And he said, "You got to be very quiet because the Germans have the machine guns trained right on this chance of getting out." There was a little footbridge. It was all broken up, and 15 of us got past over the bridge and away from out of the encirclement. But this is the type of combat when we were in at Hildesheim. I would say we were in combat about 4 weeks. We had, obviously, in combat, we didn't take a shower. It was 4 weeks. And we had the big treat. We're going to the shower unit. And they had the shower units, were big canvas trucks, and they had the showers, and they would take the water out of the river. Now remember, this is that cold winter. So the water would come out of the river and be heated in a big machine, and we'd have a nice warm shower. So we all we're in a truck, and we get to the shower unit, get in, and we're in combat about a month at a time. Took off all our clothes and threw them in a pile because we knew we'd get new nice clean underwear, and so we threw it all in the pile. And got into the shower unit, and everyone was laughing at it because we had lost so much weight, ribs were showing, and laughing. And all of a sudden, the shower unit breaks down. No more heated water. Icy water coming out of the river. And so we said, so we jumped out of that, and where's the towels? Well, we don't have any clean towels. You'll have to use the towels the other fellows used before the other. So we had to take all dirty towels, etc. No, how about our underwear? Don't have any. We had to go back in the pile. We didn't know whose underwear we were getting. They had been worn for a month. Put on that old dirty underwear and get in the truck and go back to combat. And then sometime I was hit with shrapnel and on the foot and a little bit on the shoulder, and didn't even know it. My feet were frozen. Didn't have any feeling. So when I finally went back to the hospital, when I had to go back, I'll tell you about that, but when I had to go back and took off my shoes, my wound was a scab. It was all cute. I didn't even know it, but that's how I got the Purple Heart. It's kind of an easy way to get the Purple Heart. So at any rate, I'm in the field hospital on the hospital train to go to some general hospital. And I still looked around at all the soldiers, packed with wounded soldiers. And I thought to myself, I got to get back. I mean, we're losing the war. I got to get back. That was your thinking at the time. After all, you're one little guy in a big war. But then I was in the hospital for 2 months, and they reclassified. They put me in the quartermaster up, and I was up in Reims, France, and it was beautiful. You know, the war was still on, but I was in quartermaster, way back from the front. It was safe. I worked in the supply division. It was supply division, and I arrived there a little after April 12th. They had French civilians and German prisoners and us working in an office. I had a adding machine or something. I had to work. They put me on some sort of an adding machine. Big transition from a rifle to an adding machine. And I had Janine as my secretary. She was, all the girls who worked there had to speak English. So I had Janine as my secretary. And I had a fellow, and across the hall from me was Lieutenant Zimmerman of the Wehrmacht, spit and polished German soldier, you know, jawohl, and but the war was on. He's right here like he was my friend. Then I kept going up in rank, and we were in charge of getting ready to go to Japan and getting the manifest, and we were the biggest supply division in Europe, getting all the stuff ready to go to Japan. The war wasn't over for us. And I applied for artillery OCS. I had the gung-ho stuff, and I applied for artillery OCS. But at any rate, we lived in a warehouse, you know, bunks in a warehouse, and also I heard these fellas outside. They just dropped a big bomb. It's going to end the war. What was the atom bomb? I said, oh, you know, that's dreaming. But the war ended in a few days, as you know, in August 1945. And so from then on, it was just a matter of waiting to go home. There were so many things happened, in all these years. So we came home, and I came home in January, and just forgot everything didn't have any hang-ups or anything. We just came home, and I was 21. Just all the friends are coming home, go to the dances and whatever, and apply for college and making all our applications and go back to normal life. And that was pretty much. I was 21, so I brought you from 3 years old at Princeton Avenue to 21 and out of the Army. So that's about the story of my experience in World War II. Thank you.
Weymouth Educational Television. Quality educational programming about our community, for our community.